Hello and welcome to this episode of another podcast of EntrepreneurTV. This next interview is one you really don't want to miss. This guy was in the Air Force, childhood dream, and then left in 2020, just at the time that lockdown happened. However, this guy couldn't have welcomed lockdown enough. It was a good time, a time to sit back and just reflect on what had happened throughout his life, which included, of course, being smuggled, out of the Indian Ocean to get to the mainland, which you'll hear during his story. And as a result of his travels and adventures all around the world, he's actually embraced that and started a business doing travel. If you want to go anywhere in the world, this is the guy that will make it happen. But he also does cruises, and he also does it for brides and grooms, doing dream destinations. This really is a cracking podcast and one that you don't want to miss. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this podcast right here on Entrepreneur TV.
Since being a teenager, I always wanted to join the military, and there was a bit of family history there. And then in 2008, the time came. I got accepted into the Air Force, into the job that I was desperate to do, which was flying in the back of big helicopters. A tumultuous career, to say the least, ups and downs, travelling all over the place. And that sort of fed the fire for what was to come later.
And then lockdown happened.
Yes, so I left the military in May 2020, just as the UK went into its first lockdown. It came at a relatively good time. I needed some time to myself. So lockdown provided that perfect cover for hibernation.
And I noticed that I was reading that you drove a car from the UK to Mongolia. What's that about?
Yeah, so in between some operational deployments, me and a colleague of mine in the RAF, we decided to enter the Mongol Rally, which is a big event run most years. I think every now and then they might have a pause, but essentially you take a car that is governed by the rules of the rally that year, and for ours it was 1.2 litres or less, and our car wasn't even a litre, and essentially you pick a route, start date from the UK, finish line in Mongolia.
And how long did that take?
So we took 5.5 weeks, because they had 3 finish parties, one after 4, one after 5, and one after 6 weeks. We chose the longer one just so that we could see as many countries as possible. And we got into a few scrapes along the way. But at the end, my colleague, his partner flew out and he proposed to her in Mongolia. So it was quite a memorable journey.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now, when you say you get into a few scrapes.
Yes.
Tell me one of them scrapes that happened.
So along the way, we'd done quite well. We'd driven past lots of teams with loads of problems, with wheels falling off and things breaking and so on. And it wasn't until we got to Central Asia, around Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan sort of way, and we started to encounter a few issues. So we destroyed our suspension in Kazakhstan, and the locals had to cut down a bigger suspension spring for our car. And just wedged it in, basically. So that was the first sign that things were going to start to go a bit pear-shaped. And then we ran out of wheels in Siberia. So, yeah, which is not a good place to run out of wheels.
There's an incident that took place, if you had to get smuggled off an island in Africa. What was that about?
So that was a different trip. It was one of my solo travels, again while I was still in the military on leave. And I went to the African island country of Comoros. And on their small sort of remoter island, if you will, I had planned it to perfection. I only had electricity for a few hours in the day at this particular place I was staying, and I had pre-planned all my travel with flights and stuff to get back to Madagascar, which is where I was going to continue my journey.
Sure.
The airline getting me back to Madagascar changed their schedule, which I found out on a Sunday. And essentially what that meant was I had to get back to the airport island a day early. The local island hopping planes stopped operating. that day. So the only way to do it was to go by sea, which is totally illegal for a foreigner because usually it's done in a tiny boat, and lots of accidents happen. And if you get caught, you're in a lot of trouble.
Sure.
So, but I needed to get back, so I took this is not a confession, by the way. I paid a local fisherman, and I can best describe it as a large double-length bathtub with an engine across the Indian Ocean between the islands very early in the morning. I managed to get back to the main island, and I caught my flight.
So these travel adventures you've had, and obviously been in the military, is this what inspired you to start the business for Travel Antraes? How did that come about?
Yeah, 100%. When I left the military, it was, I don't want to work for anybody. I need the flexibility. My partner lives in Europe, so I spend my time bouncing around between the UK and Germany.
Okay.
And I needed that flexibility. I needed some personal goal to aim towards, and starting a business just ticked all those boxes, really. And the only industry I was ever going to get into was travel.
Starting a business is very daunting for people because it takes them out their comfort zone. You know, you were in the military, you've got a salary coming in. Now you're getting into a totally unknown. Did you have any fears about starting, or was it, no, I'm going to make this work?
Yes and no. I think apprehension is healthy for a business owner when they start up, because if you don't have that, then you're probably not going to learn properly. You're going to make mistakes in the early days. I certainly made lots of mistakes in marketing when I started, but now you iron out all those little creases and roll with the punches. Essentially, stay focused with what you're trying to achieve, and you will get there.
And what sort of bumps did you come across when you first started that you've now ironed out?
So I started as a franchise. That's how I got my foot in the travel door, because there's lots of legislation and regulation in the travel world. And in hindsight, it was the right decision for me then. But I found it quite restricting in what I could sell. So getting my own license after was the right path for me. But some of the mistakes I made was saying yes to everything. Yeah. Because you're petrified of giving away business. Whereas now I say no a lot.
Sometimes that's a good thing to do, because it reins you in as well, and makes you figure out what works, what doesn't work, that fits you, right for your business. Yeah. Where did the name come from? What does it mean?
So Travel Antraes is, I spent ages, it was the hardest part of starting on my own, was finding a suitable name. Something that had a little bit of meaning, a little bit of connection to me. So I'm fascinated by science and things like that. And I just stumbled across the 57 navigational stars that have been used for generations, centuries by explorers. And the whole ethos of Travel Antraes is about discovering new places, whether that's going to the same country you always go to, but a different place, or something totally different. And Atarus is one of those navigational stars. So it kind of fitted in nicely with the message. And after a bit of teaching people how to say it, it's good.
Now, types of dreams that you can provide for people, because that's what you're advertising, that you do dreams. Obviously, you've done a lot of travelling. Mm-hmm. You know what works, what doesn't work, and what's smooth. So tell me a typical dream that somebody will come to you for and you can make run really smooth.
So for me, the dream starts when I get the opportunity to speak to someone. Lots of travel companies are online based only. I do a lot of exhibitions, especially wedding shows for couples looking to get married abroad and honeymoons. So for me, that dream starts with me sort of giving across the passion I have for some of these destinations. The biggest one that I use is safari in Africa. It is, anybody that loves wildlife and nature in any way has to do that at some point in their life. And
I've heard about safaris in Africa, but tell me what's involved in that, because everybody's, when I speak to people that have been to Africa, they talk about, I was on the Jeep and I was in the desert and I seen this, but there must be much more involved in that. Tell me a wee bit about what's involved in planning of that.
Absolutely. So for me, the conversation starts with the three big hitters in Africa: South Africa, Tanzania, or Kenya. There's many other places to do safari that I do say to people that are maybe looking to go a bit more off the beaten track. But my contacts I'll pick Tanzania for an example, the planning process that we go through when I'm talking about an itinerary for a client is so in depth.
Yeah. But
by the time it comes to the client, it's just on a piece of paper. So it's done. All the edges are rounded off. And there's so many nuanced ways of doing a safari, whether it's in a lodge, in a tent, which can be a bit daunting to some people, but when they see the picture and it's more luxurious than a hotel you'd find in London, it's... Yeah.
Okay. Weddings, do you get a lot of people looking for weddings across in these places?
Yeah, not so much Africa. Although you do get the occasional wedding inquiry for places like Zanzibar and stuff, but weddings have just been something that I've fallen into, really. So I learned some really quick lessons in the early days, and now I like to think I speak from a position of knowledge and authority when it comes to destination weddings. I would say the biggest challenge for me in that sector is expectation management for young couples that think getting married abroad is the cheap thing to do. There's so much more involved, and that's what I'm here to do. Is not I'm not going to pull punches with the conversations, because if I can't help them, they then need to move on.
Well, I'd imagine trying to arrange somebody's wedding in a country that you're not going to be in when they're getting married. Does that not give you sleepless nights thinking, I hope nothing goes wrong? I mean, what do you do preparation beforehand? Dealing with suppliers and things. You've got all that in place so that when they come to you, everything's going to be smooth. What makes that position happen that it's going to be smooth?
So it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. Putting my clients, even if it's just a trip, in someone else's hands is really tough. When it comes to a wedding, it's a case of, if I'm dealing with a big hotel company, for example, I really do fight the corner for my clients.
Sure.
So I'll be sending emails daily if
constantly,
I need to. And I only really partner with brands and people that I know.
Yeah.
And if I have to go off my known list, then I've got very, very thorough vetting process, but via reviews from multiple sources and things like that.
So I'd imagine when you've done a wedding overseas, you've not been in the country, and it's went really well, and you were stressing about it, that feeling must be euphoric, is it? And then the feedback that you must get.
It is, especially from the couple. That's my main focus, essentially. But when I found the biggest issue with a destination wedding isn't very rarely the couple, it's the guests.
The guests?
Yeah. There's always issues. I call them rogue guests, and I talk about them with all the couples that inquire with me. But yeah, it's a great feeling when you get back. I don't contact them every day when they're abroad, like setting up and getting married. But I do like to keep tabs. Generally speaking, no news is always good news. Yeah.
Do you find that when you're arranging and dealing with these suppliers, that your military background kicks in and think this needs to be done right and it needs to be done by this time, or is that always there?
Yes and no. The job I used to do was quite different from that stereotypical hardline military stereotype, if you will, just based on the job we were in and the environment we were in. It was very flexible, very grown up. But the organisational elements of being in the military, world definitely come into play, especially with a wedding.
But you don't just do weddings, you do cruises and adventures, don't you? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so all types of travel we look to do. We're not trying to niche ourselves into one particular thing that may come in the future. Definitely stay flexible on that. But cruising, I'd never been on a cruise until a couple of years ago. Didn't think overly much of it. I totally was taken away with the myths of cruising from, decades ago.
Sure.
What an incredible way to travel. It really is.
I've never been in a cruise.
I thoroughly recommend it. Yeah.
So tell me what a typical cruise would involve then. If I was to arrange it through you, what would it include?
Yeah, so nowadays there is a cruise company and product for every type of traveller. You know, there really is. It's not, a lot of people have this myth that it's maybe for older clientele, for example.
Yeah.
There are family-based cruise companies, there are adult-only based cruise companies which have a much, I don't want to say party vibe, but a more upbeat vibe, shall we say. And then there's itineraries that will be standard type Mediterranean cruises.
Sure.
Caribbean cruises, these are the destinations that people think about, but more and more you're finding companies that will cruise to Antarctica specifically for expedition type cruising, as well as the Pacific and the Indian Ocean and all sorts of places like that.
And this is where do you come in compared to somebody maybe looking on the internet and booking it themselves? Why go through you? Tell me what the difference would be.
So I pride myself obviously on my destination knowledge, having been to, I think last count, around 110, 11 countries.
Oh, wow.
That destination knowledge is, you're not going to find that, I don't think. Well, very rarely you'll find that with other companies. So that's the first point I love to get across. The second bit is, I know we're living in a time where, you know, pennies are important. You know, you need to look after them. However, if people are booking the cheapest possible product, especially in the cruise world,
yeah,
just because it's the cheapest, they could end up on a glorified booze cruise, for want of a better word.
That's true, yeah.
Which is maybe not the experience that they're after. So to save them the time of sifting through the hundreds and hundreds of different cruise products, you know, coming to someone like me, I can cut all of that research out almost in a conversation, just based on the knowledge I have.
Right, so I just phone you and say, this is what I'm looking for, you find it.
Exactly.
And save me having to trail through thousands and thousands of pages of internet.
Exactly.
What's the craziest thing you've arranged? Anything unusual?
So my personal travel is quite mad. One of the things that I've realised is that most people don't like travelling the way I do. But the craziest thing I have arranged was a honeymoon for a lovely couple. They wanted to do a safari as well as the Maldives, which is a really hard combination. In their sort of singular form, they're quite normal trips, but connecting them, it was quite a challenge. So I would say that's probably one of the more challenging itineraries that I put together.
People watching this will think, oh, the carbon footprint and everything else, but you're quite for sustainability.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
So I didn't jump into shouting about Travel Antraes being a more sustainably orientated travel company, because what I noticed at a lot of trade events and things like that, there were big warnings about companies that were greenwashing, to use a buzzword, and I was really worried that I didn't want Travel Antraes to be umbrellaed with that term. So it's taken me 2 years to find a partnership, or partnerships, should I say now, that I believe in, that Travel Antraes is not going to shout about. The information is all there, and if anybody needs to delve into the details, we're more than happy to provide that information. But we know what we're doing is great, and I know my partners are doing everything that they do, which is incredible work around the world. And it goes far more than, say, planting trees, which is from a science background, I'm not convinced. Yeah.
That takes me into the next bit about the investors and wildlife. 10% of bookings, if people agree to that, go to the BBOT. What is that? Tell us what that's about.
Yeah, so that's a domestic partnership that has just been launched with Travel Antraes. It's the Berks, Bucks and Oxfordshire Wildlife Trust. So I partner with them, and essentially 10% of the profit from any bookings from their members goes back to that wildlife trust.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So not only are we partnered with global sustainably minded companies with projects all over the world,
sure,
it's also good to know, to look after where we come from and where we're traveling from. So, Travel Antraes is now an all-encompassing, more sustainably minded business.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So what I want to do now is ask you how someone can calculate their carbon footprint. How does that work? I've seen something on your website.
Yeah. Again, there are many, many things. If you Google searched how to do this, you would get 100 different calculator type products, and they'd all give you very different amounts. So which one's right? Well, a lot of them are probably right, given the models that they're using. We use Sustainable Travel International, which is an American company with global projects all around the place. We focus on offsetting flights, ocean cruising especially, and road transport. To sort of combat that, for people that maybe go on more than one holiday a year, we also have lower impact trips, which will involve rail, river cruising, sort of directly from the UK. But that calculator on the Travel Antraes website is, it's really good, very easy to use, and it's reasonably priced offsetting. I've come across many calculators which wouldn't make sense, and I can't see what they're doing over some of the others. So I question some of those higher priced offset calculators here.
You're FCA compliant as well, and ATOL registered.
Yep.
Am I right?
Yes.
So what security does that offer somebody thinking about booking with you?
ATOL protection is something that probably many people have heard about when they go to book a package holiday, and Travel Antraes has its own ATOL license. So anything that has a flight element and a ground element, whether that's a car hire or a hotel, will afford them that protection. And that basically what ATOL means is, should any of those providers go out of business, that client is financially protected. So
cool.
The biggest example in recent years was Thomas Cook go bust, with hundreds, maybe thousands of people, I can't remember, still abroad. The ATOL scheme kicks in and gets all those people home. That's a very good example of that. But trips that don't have a flight element, that can't be put under that ATOL banner, are protected by my membership to Protected Trust Services. So any money that's paid on a booking by the client sits in a trust account. It doesn't touch Travel Antraes until after that client has travelled. So this isn't going to happen, but let's, for example, say Travel Antraes went out of business. All my clients' money and deadlines for it to go to various suppliers is totally protected. So their trip would happily continue as originally planned.
These podcasts wouldn't be possible without our amazing sponsors. And today's sponsor is Travel Antraes. So, do you know what? Make sure you support them too and check out their website.
Imagine saying I do on a pristine beach with turquoise waters glistening around you. Travel Antraes connects you with top wedding planners, creating unforgettable destination weddings and honeymoons in paradise. From French Polynesia and the Caribbean to Europe and Africa, make your wedding and honeymoon a magical moment to remember forever with Travel Antraes. Visit travelantares.co.uk now to start planning your perfect celebration and discover your next adventure today.
What does the future hold for Travel Antraes? Where do you see yourself? Because you've came out of the military now, and now you're running your business. You're running hard with it. It looks like it's going great. Where do you see it going in the next few years?
I can see Travel Antraes niching itself to specific destinations. Africa is a personal passion of mine, so that would definitely be on the hit list. And then it would be places probably that lend themselves very much to discovery. Southeast Asia, the Pacific. I'm a massive fan of the islands in the Pacific. They're very much overlooked by UK travellers because it's so far away. South America as well, adventurous. I'm more than happy to do what I would consider fly and flop trips. Beach. People just want to get away, and they may be to somewhere new as well. But I can probably see Travel Antraes really, really focusing on those discovering adventure type destinations.
Are you enjoying the business journey?
I am. There's been some up and downs, as I alluded to before, but forming these partnerships, which take a lot of work in the background. And when you're a small business owner, the brunt of it always gets put on you. So, you know, I do all my own accounting because I love maths and numbers because I'm weird. You know, I love the sales bit. I love putting that passion across the client. So,
but that's good because you're taking responsibility. And a lot of businesses, you know, I've met a lot of business owners and they've got their accountant that does this. They've got somebody that answers the phone. And when you ask them, how's the business going? I don't know, you'll have to ask my accountant. So you taking responsibility that's a big thing. And a lot of businesses, I think, should do that more. What advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about starting their own business today, no matter what age they are? If you could give them that, what did you want somebody to tell you when you started that you wish you knew?
Don't rush to buy things. You don't need to spend loads and loads and loads of money unless you've got like the newest, bestest product in the world that needs a considerable amount of investment from, you know, outside sources. Just get things set up and sell yourself. You know, yourself doesn't cost anything to you. You know, your business will pay you back eventually, but just hold the reins in. I was paying for adverts and all sorts at the beginning, and without really researching whether that is the right way to advertise my travel business. So yeah, they were the big lessons that I learned at the beginning.
We're now on to the new thing we've done in the podcast, where we've got a question. Now this question is actually from the other presenter, she's boss. I interview the guy, she interviews the woman. And when she heard you were coming in, she says, I've got a question. And her question is from Emily. You obviously travel a lot. What is the one possibly unusual item that you pack in your case and will not leave home without? P.S. Hers is a mug and tea bags.
I've been eyeing that envelope up since we started, so that's a good question. An unusual item that I pack
that you'll never go without.
Well, I never go anywhere without my toothbrush. I know it's not an unusual item, but I would literally, if I could travel with one item in the whole world, it would be my toothbrush. It's just my comfort blanket. Yeah, but you know, unusual items.
Well, I'll give you an example.
That's a tough one.
Simon Cowell's unusual item was a luggage weight.
Yeah.
You see, because the weights are different in the world. And he had to check that he wasn't going to be stopped or whatever. And I thought, what an unusual thing.
That is very odd, yeah. I don't think I've got an unusually
nothing crazy unusual, but your toothbrush.
Yeah, I mean, occasionally I used to travel with my my knife, which sounds a bit odd, I know, but it was always there because the trips I was doing, especially the drive, for example, and my solo travel to some very obscure islands in Africa. Yeah, it came in handy once or twice for practical purposes, not for anything nefarious, obviously. Yeah.
Last thing is, you'll see that you've got a pen and a piece of paper on your desk.
I can.
I would like you to write a question for the next guest.
Okay.
Doesn't matter what it is, and then seal it in the envelope. I'm not going to open it. And then at the end of the next interview, whoever does it is going to open that envelope and ask that person. So it can be anything. Wow. We don't know what they're going to be doing for a living.
No, okay.
So it could be a business-related question, personal question, makes absolutely no odds.
Okay.
We thought this would add a wee bit of fun element.
It's hard. Yeah.
It's no easy because you know you think, well, what can I possibly ask? Like, you know, the question I always ask everybody is, what advice would you give somebody that's thinking of starting a new business? You know, it could be anything at all. You know, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? And have you ever been broke? How did you get out of a situation?
I've got it. There we go.
Perfect.
Okay.
Right, fold it up, and that is going to go to the next person who comes on. Listen, great insight. Love the story. Military, lockdown, travelling, going to Mongolia in a car, getting smuggled out of Africa, starting a business. And great advice, you know, stick to your guns. And it's a big thing people, you know, coming out of the military or any job and then jumping into being self-employed. And you doing it and running with it and getting successful with it is phenomenal, you know, and I wish you all the success. You're a lovely bloke. You've got a great business. And I think, you know, especially with the weddings, you know, bride and grooms that are looking to travel around the world, and they need somebody they can trust to make that happen, and you're clearly the guy to make that happen. Thank you for coming in for the podcast, and
thank you for having me.
Wish you all the success.
Imagine saying I do on a pristine beach with turquoise waters glistening around you. Travel Antraes connects you with top wedding planners, creating unforgettable destination weddings and honeymoons in paradise. From French Polynesia and the Caribbean to Europe and Africa, make your wedding and honeymoon a magical moment to remember forever with Travel Antraes. Visit travelantares.co.uk now to start planning your perfect celebration and discover your next adventure today.